Great. Good morning once again. I think I was right on time, 10 o'clock. I welcomed those that joined early. But let me take this opportunity to welcome everyone for this important event in our FinScope South Africa calendar. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual launch of the FinScope South Africa 2025 results. Thank you for joining us. I know there are a lot of other things that you could be doing, but you have decided to join us. We don't take this time for granted. So we are honored to have you as our distinguished guest, and you are representing different institutions and stakeholders. Your efforts to join us actually reflect our shared commitment to advancing financial inclusion in South Africa and globally. As you know, that we implement FinScopes across the globe. So we are really honored to have you. The FinScope South Africa is an important source of evidence on how adults in South Africa access and use financial services. The insights we will share today will help inform policies, products, and initiatives that promote greater financial inclusion and improve financial well-being. We trust you will find today's program insightful. We look forward to the discussions that will follow long after the launch. And if I can say that the FinScope South Africa here is really used by different stakeholders. So I will elaborate towards the end of the session in terms of some of the different partners that we work with. Let me go on now to the agenda. So today's agenda is packed. I have already given you the opening remarks. Next, we are going to have our colleague from National Treasury. Thank you so much for allowing to be our keynote speaker, which is going to be the State of Financial Inclusion in South Africa, Policy Perspective and Future Priorities. And this is Notembeko Lubisi. And then to the launch of the results, my colleague, Jabulani Khumalo. He is not new to this event. He always takes us through the FinScope launches. So Mfundisi, thank you so much for investing time and going through the data. It has been really a lot of hard work that has gone through this process. So we will be looking forward to hear what you have prepared for us. And then about 5 minutes to 11, I'll come back again and give some closing remarks. The next slide is really just some house rules. We just have 3 house rules. It's important to note that all participants, they are going to be muted. So if you have any questions, please post your questions in the Q&A in the chat box. This will be addressed by the FinMark Trust team. My team is waiting to answer any questions. But if I can also say, if there is any burning questions as well, it might be based on this presentation or any other FinScope related matters, please send your queries to us. We will give the email address that you can share with us. And the material that we are sharing today, it is going to be shared with all the registered participants after the launch event. So thank you so much. To the next item on the agenda. Over to you, Notembeko. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, and thank you for the warm welcome. Esteemed guests, did you know that the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa does not explicitly recognize financial inclusion as a socio-economic right? Instead, Section 22 guarantees every citizen the freedom to choose their trade, occupation, or profession and to establish a business. For many South Africans, unfortunately, that constitutional ideal remains out of reach because participation in the economy depends on their ability to access and use well-designed financial services. FinScope Consumer Survey 2025 points to a shift in savings behavior, with food continuing to be the main savings priority as rising financial pressures force more households to focus on basic necessities. Ladies and gentlemen, when the price of food, transport, and utilities rise faster than income, people without access to formal financial services struggle to manage their daily necessities and are more likely to rely on expensive informal lenders. For example, FinScope 2025 reveals that the use of informal financial channels has increased, with 72% of individuals now using them, compared with 61% in 2023. Continued limited access to the full suite of financial services leaves households more vulnerable to rising living costs, contributing to greater inequality and financial hardship. Navigate to the next. Distinguished guests, South Africa has been on a long journey of financial inclusion. In 2003, only about 66% of adults had access to basic financial services. Today, that figure stands at 99%. If South Africa's nearly 3.4 million social grant beneficiaries who use SASSA bank cards only are removed from banking institutions, then 82% of adults are considered banked. Does this mean that our job is done? Certainly not. This is because, despite near universal access, many South Africans still struggle to use financial services to improve their lives. The small business finance gap runs into trillions of dollars. If we expect small enterprises to create 90% of the 11 million new jobs by the year 2030, then our SMME finance agenda requires a fundamental shift from fragmented interventions to bold systemic reforms. The G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion for Small Businesses that was published during South Africa's 2025 G20 presidency provides a clear roadmap, prioritizing key market infrastructure reforms, reformed credit reporting systems, secure transactions and collateral registries, and effective insolvency regimes. It also emphasizes the need to integrate a gender lens into the design of policies and interventions to address access to finance for women-owned and women-led small businesses. Respected guests, since joining the financial sector in 2019, I have seen the extraordinary potential of South Africa's financial system. Yet I have also seen how slowly the reforms needed to make that potential a reality for all South Africans have been implemented. Today, I invite everyone in this room to reflect on three important questions that I believe will shape the future of financial inclusion in South Africa. Question number one, can South Africa afford to continue to downplay the significance of financial inclusion as one of our greatest untapped potential opportunities to advance food security, reduce inequality, promote gender equality, improve health and well-being, and create decent work and sustainable economic growth? Question number two, what must each of us do through policy, regulation, innovation, and partnerships to turn the vision of an inclusive financial system into a lived reality for every South African? And then lastly, the third question, how can we ensure that there is sustained, dedicated capacity to continue generating and collecting evidence-based data in this space? So, ladies and gentlemen, these questions are not just questions for debate. They are important because despite our challenges, it has been proven that financial inclusion when implemented effectively, can be a powerful lever to uplift communities. One example of how South Africa's financial sector is innovating to meet the needs of underserved and unserved consumers is the emergence of buy now, pay later products. According to a recent TransUnion report, 62% of surveyed consumers have a buy now, pay later product. Importantly, 37% of BNPL users are underserved, using approximately 17% who including approximately 17% who are accessing formal credit for the first time. These findings suggest that BNPL is helping to broaden access to short-term credit for consumer segments that have traditionally had limited access to conventional credit products. This reinforces a broader lesson about digitization, which is that the true measure of fintech lies not only in technological innovation or profitability, but in its ability to improve consumers' financial well-being. Studying fintech through a consumer lens shifts the focus from the technology itself to how digital financial solutions change the way people access, use, and benefit from these services. The landscape of financial literacy has also been evolving to accommodate new trends driven by the growing prominence of digital finance. Bridging the digital divide will require not only access to digital payment solutions, but also continued investments in digital financial literacy and capability programs so that consumers can make informed decisions and use financial products responsibly. Innovation, consumer education, and protection should therefore be viewed not as competing objectives, but as mutually reinforcing foundations of an inclusive financial system. The financial inclusion policy that we published in 2023 acknowledges that a focused approach to inclusion will not only benefit low-income and vulnerable South Africans, but all of society. For instance, the ongoing reforms of the national payment system are more than just modernizing payment infrastructure. They are about creating the conditions for broader participation in the digital economy. Through the Payments Ecosystem Modernization Program, the NEPS Bill, the Draft Vision 2030, and the Draft Authorization Framework, the National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank are advancing a more open, interoperable, and innovative payments ecosystem that supports competition, expands consumer choice, and enables a wider range of products to offer payment services. These reforms aim to create an environment in which a broader range of South Africans can access and benefit from secure, efficient, and affordable digital payment services, thereby supporting the safe acceleration of payments, digitization, and cooperative development across the African continent. No single institution can bring South Africans into the economic mainstream. It requires partnership across government agencies, regulators, the private sector, and our communities. That is why the National Treasury, together with partners, has been hard at work laying the groundwork for a national financial inclusion strategy that is co-created via technical working groups and broad consultation. In fact, as far back as 2026, our policymakers envisioned a collaborative structure, which is the Intergovernmental Financial Inclusion Working Group, established under the Financial System Council of Regulators. This Financial Inclusion Working Group is supported by a multi-stakeholder financial inclusion forum for industry and civil society. This approach was designed to encourage greater openness and collaboration. Distinguished guests, as we reflect on the future of financial inclusion, let us be reminded of a timeless exchange from Alice in Wonderland. Alice asked a Cheshire cat one day, open quote, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" Close quote. The cat replied, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." When Alice responded, "I don't much care where," the cat concluded, "Then it doesn't matter which way you go." This exchange, ladies and gentlemen, provides a lesson for us. If we are not clear about the future we want to build, any road will seem acceptable. As South Africa develops and implements the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, we cannot afford to be like Alice. If our goal is a financially inclusive South Africa, then the policies we pursue and reforms we prioritize must be informed by evidence rather than assumption, because financial inclusion cannot be achieved through luck. Currently, South Africa has a wealth of financial sector data spread across various regulators and institutions. However, we still lack a centralized system to compile and publicize key financial inclusion metrics on the supply side. This data gap makes it harder for us to benchmark ourselves internationally and even to monitor certain aspects of inclusion progress in real time. The design of a financial inclusion data architecture, inclusive of both demand and supply side indicators, remains one of our most important strategic priorities. This dashboard will enable us to understand the diverse needs of different population groups, craft meaningful baselines, and policy interventions. We have great examples to learn from. Nigeria recently developed a National Financial Inclusion Dashboard, the Women's Financial Inclusion Dashboard, in partnership with development agencies. The Central Bank of Nigeria's dashboard stacks disaggregated supply-side data from banks, mobile money providers, and credit bureaus into an accessible online repository. Also, Bangladesh Central Bank has done something similar, and it's proving equally useful. Even closer to home, SADC has developed a financial inclusion portal as a regional data hub. This portal will allow each member country to compare progress and coordinate better. South Africa should be a leader in this space, not an exception. I call on the regulators to work closely with the technical working group on monitoring, evaluation, and learning, which we've established to improve the collection and maintenance of financial inclusion statistics in South Africa. As we look toward the future, our principle stands out above all others. Our ability to collaborate will define our ability to succeed. No single institution can bring all South Africans into the economic mainstream. It requires partnerships across government agencies, regulators, academia, the private sector, and our communities. In conclusion, let me highlight that across the world, the conversation is shifting. The question is no longer how many people have access to bank accounts. The real question is, are people's lives, financial lives, improving? That is the standard by which we will be judged on our progress. For South Africa, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. We cannot expect to improve financial well-being while delaying the reforms needed to build a truly inclusive financial sector. Progress requires more than good intentions. It requires fast implementation. The mathematics is simple. Without access to a full suite of financial products, sustainable financial health is difficult to attain. Without meaningful use of financial services, strategic financial health is difficult to reach. Without quality financial products delivered through accessible channels, secure financial health is difficult to reach. If financial well-being is our destination, esteemed guests, then accelerating financial inclusion is the path that will take us there. Let us choose progress and implementation today. Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. Thank you, Nonto, for setting the scene so effectively and for reminding us of the critical role that financial inclusion plays in advancing South Africa's development agenda. Your reflections have provided the policy context for today's discussion. Building on that foundation, the FinScope South Africa 2025 findings allow us to examine how these policy priorities are reflected in the lived experience of South Africans. The dataset goes beyond statistics. It tells the story of how people earn, spend, save, borrow, insure themselves, and navigate an increasingly challenging economic environment. Behind every percentage is a South African making difficult financial decisions, balancing competing priorities and striving to build financial resilience. Now let's go to the agenda for today. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll explore what these findings mean for policymakers, regulators, financial institutions, and the future of financial inclusion in South Africa. To guide our discussion, we will begin with the research objectives and methodology, then examine the economic context shaping the financial lives of South Africans, and explore the pillars of the financial sector. Finally, we will conclude with the key insights from 2025 findings and strategic priorities to strengthen financial inclusion in South Africa. Before we explore the findings, let me briefly cover the purpose of the study and the methodology behind it. This provides the foundation for the evidence and insights presented throughout the report. FinScope South Africa is designed to provide a comprehensive, and let's move to our objective slides, Mike. That's the next one, thank you. FinScope South Africa is designed to provide a comprehensive picture of financial inclusion across the country. It goes beyond measuring access by examining how and why people make financial decisions, the barriers they face in using financial services effectively, and how this behavior evolves over time. By identifying these device needs of different population segments, FinScope provides the evidence needed to inform policy, strengthen regulation, and support the development of more inclusive financial products, services. The next slide. Ultimately, FinScope is more than a survey. It is a national evidence platform that helps shape better decisions, better markets, and better financial outcomes for South Africans. As we proceed, now turning briefly to the methodology slide. The survey is based on 5,600 face-to-face interviews conducted with adults across South Africa. Just a reminder, basically it's 5,000, but we then add the 600 to enhance our analysis capabilities for the migrants. The sample is national and provincial representative, and all findings are weighted to the official 2025 population estimates, giving us confidence that the results are robust, reliable, and representative of the adult population. Next slide. Financial inclusion does not exist in isolation. To fully understand the findings, we must first consider the socio-economic realities that influence how South Africans earn, spend, save, borrow, and manage financial risk. And this section speaks to that. South Africa is a home to approximately 63 million people, including 46 million adults aged 16 and over, who form the basis of the FinScope analysis. Women account for a slight majority of the adult population at 52%. The survey also estimates that between 3.1 to 3.7 million adults are foreign nationals, representing around 7% of the adult population. This is an important segment, particularly for understanding migration patterns and cross-border financial behavior, such as remittances. Moving to the next slide. We are looking at the South Africa's labor market, which remains under significant pressure. Formal employment remains unchanged at just 22%, highlighting the limited growth in salaried jobs. Around 1 in 3 South African adults are unemployed. This is predominantly women and young people, with almost half lacking a matric qualification, limiting access to formal employment. In addition, 70% rely on social grant as important source of income. These findings reinforce the need for policies that create jobs and financial solutions that support financially constrained South Africans, particularly those outside the formal economy. Moving to the next slide. With the formal employment remaining stagnant, many South Africans are creating their own livelihoods. This brings us to the informal sector, which has become one of the country's most important economic safety nets. The number of adults earning an income in the informal economy has increased from 8 million in 2024 to 9.5 million in 2025, meaning that nearly 1 in 5 South African adults now earn a living outside the formal payroll system. Of these, 8.1 million are South African-born citizens, and 1.4 million are foreign nationals, providing important evidence for ongoing discussions around migration and employment. Despite its resilience, the sector remains financially constrained. The average monthly income is just around 4,000, and more than half of informal workers rely on 2 or more income sources to make ends meet. The informal economy is no longer a marginal sector. It is a vital source of livelihoods and a key shock absorber for South Africa's economy. Next slides. We have seen that the informal economy now supports close to 10 million South Africans, to be precise, 9.5 million. The next question is, what does this economy actually look like? When we group more than 20 informal activities into 4 structural pillars, a clear picture emerges. Residential maintenance and property services is now the largest pillar, accounting for 38% of informal workers, followed by the domestic and care economy at 26%. And you will see there, and we do account in terms of how that 26% or 30% is constructed. Retail and hospitality remain resilient at 16.3%, while artisanal and technical services contribute 11.4%. The message is clear. The informal economy is not random or fragmented. It is structured and resilient part of South Africa's economy. Understanding these pillars gives policymakers and financial service providers a practical roadmap for designing products, finance and support that reflects the realities of informal workers and help unlock their economic potential. Now, moving to the next slide. Colleagues, the financial realities we have discussed, the limited growth in formal employment, the expansion of the informal economy, rising living costs and pressure on household finances ultimately shape the level of vulnerability experienced by South Africans. For the past 3 years, FinScope has been reporting the Financial Health Index, which shows how South Africans manage their financial lives. This year, we introduced a complementary measure, the Financial Vulnerability Index. The distinction between the two is important. The Financial Health Index tells us how people are coping financially today, while the Vulnerability Index tells us why some individuals remain exposed to financial shocks by considering structural factors such as poverty lines indicator, labor market exclusion, disabilities, digital exclusion, and financial capability constraints. The findings shows that 62% of South African adults are financially vulnerable, while 38% fall into the no vulnerable category. Importantly, this picture has remained largely unchanged since 2024, highlighting that vulnerability is not a short-term challenge. It is a structural reality affecting many South Africans. Now, moving to the next 3 slides, which just give us some segmentations. Vulnerability remains closely linked to employment status, but having a job does not always guarantee financial security. Almost 1 in 4 formal employed adults are still financially vulnerable, while vulnerability is significantly higher among informal workers and those without employment. The highest level are observed among unemployed and the discouraged work seekers. highlighting the need for targeted interventions that strengthen financial resilience across different livelihood groups. The next slide. This analysis reveals that the vulnerability differs significantly by livelihood source. Those who depend on transfers such as social grant, family support, or remittances experience the highest levels of vulnerability because they have limited independent income sources. Among grant recipients, 43% fall into the high or severe vulnerability categories. This does not mean grants create vulnerability. Rather, it shows that grants are reaching those already facing the greatest economic challenge. Informal workers and small businesses show greater resilience, but remain exposed to uncertain or of irregular incomes. Now, the last segment picture, it's when we bring the two measures together. That will be your financial vulnerability index and the financial health indicator. The relationship is clear. Adults with lower vulnerability generally show stronger financial health outcomes, with most classified as healthy or emerging. However, as vulnerability increases, financial health deteriorates. Among those experiencing severe vulnerability, more than 4 in 5 are classified as fragile or vulnerable. This confirms that financial well-being is closely linked not only to individuals' financial choices, but also to the broader economic conditions people face. Now, next to the next section, the findings remind us that many South Africans enter the financial system already facing significant economic constraints. And let's explore that in the next section. Having looked at the broader economic environment, we now turn to how South Africans are allocating their income. So this is a wallet share. The findings shows that 83% or 83.5% of individuals' income is absorbed by essential living expenses. And this trend is slightly increasing. And when you look at these living expenses, you will see that now food has become the biggest pressure point, increasing from 27.9% to 36.3% over the past year. As a result, South Africans have only around 11% of their income available for other financial priorities, including debt repayments, savings, insurance, and longer-term financial planning. The pressure is on the individual's wallet, reducing the capacity to build financial resilience. Next slide. Just a different indicator and looking at other pressure points. While this indicator is measured at a household level, its impact is ultimately felt by people. The 6.1 million households that went without electricity because they could not afford it represent approximately 16 million South Africans living in households experiencing energy affordability challenges. Although this has improved from 17 million people in 2024, the scale remains significant. Behind these numbers are individuals and families forced to make difficult trade-offs between paying for electricity and meeting other essential household needs. A stark reminder of the financial pressure many South Africans continue to face. We now turn to what this economic pressure means for borrowing behavior. Among South Africans who use credit, 38%, equivalent to around 11.6 million adults, are over-indebted or experiencing significant credit distress. But the bigger concern is why people are borrowing. In 2025, 54% of credit users borrowed to buy food, rising sharply from 43% in 2024. This tells us that credit is increasingly being used as a coping mechanism for basic survival rather than as a tool for building assets or improving future well-being. When people borrow to put food on the table, it is a clear indication that households' incomes are struggling to keep pace with the rising cost of living. The next session. The evidence so far shows that many South Africans are navigating a constrained financial environment. We now ask the next question: how is the financial system supporting people as they manage these pressures? That takes us directly now to the financial inclusion indicator. And as indicated by Nonto, access to financial services is now almost universal, with nearly all South Africans adults financially included. However, the data shows that access does not always translate into financial resilience. Around 70% of adults continue to combine formal and informal financial mechanisms to meet their financial needs, showing that informal services remain an important part of how South Africans manage their finances. During Savings Month, which is July, one trend stands out. The proportion of adults who save has declined from 47% in 2024 to 40% in 2025. This reflects the growing pressure of South Africans' ability to build financial buffers as living costs increase. Growth in formal inclusion has been driven mainly by bank accounts, ownership, and formal credit, while uptake on other financial products has remained largely unchanged. Now, having looked at the financial inclusion broadly, we now zoom into banking, the foundation of South Africa's formal financial system. South Africa has continued to make progress in expanding banking access, with 89% of adults, equivalent to 41 million people, now holding a bank account, up from 38.4 million in 2024. Encouragingly, the share of mailbox users has continued to decline, reflecting the impact of digitalizations and the growing use of electronic banking channels. However, the challenge of meaningful usage remains. Around 13 million banked adults still mainly use the account to receive money and withdraw it immediately, rather than as a tool for broader financial management. This behavior is particularly common among social grant recipients, where bank accounts often function primarily as payment channels rather than platforms for savings payments or building financial resilience. Next slide. Another important trend is the rise of multi-banking. Today, 41% of banked adults hold 2 or more bank accounts, up from 39% in 2024. However, this is not mainly driven by consumers searching for better pricing or banking products. Many additional accounts are opened to receive and manage social grants or government payments. The message is that South Africans are using multiple accounts as a way to organize and protect their finances, reflecting how consumers are adapting their banking behavior to manage everyday financial pressures. Next slide. While banking access has expanded significantly, the consumer experience remains a critical part of financial inclusion. Nearly half of South Africans, that is 46%, experienced a problem with their bank during the past year. The most common issue relates to unexpected or unclear charges, highlighting the importance of transparency. However, one finding requires particular attention is the following. 7% of adults, approximately 3.4 million South Africans, experience fraud, illegal debit order, or phishing attacks. As banking becomes increasingly digital, building trust will depend not only expanding access, but also on protecting consumers through stronger fraud prevention, transparent pricing, and effective support when problems occur. Financial inclusion is ultimately built on trust. Consumers must have confidence that their money, information, and transactions are protected. On the next slide, when consumers experience problems, most still rely on their bank as the first point of contact. 65% report issues directly to their bank, although this has declined slightly from last year. However, very few consumers escalate complaints to independent channels such as Ombuds and the FSCA or SAPS. More concerning, almost 1 in 3 consumers do not report their problem at all. This suggests a gap in consumer confidence, awareness, or trust in available redress mechanisms. A strong financial system requires more than effective products. It requires trust, accessible and well understood consumer redress mechanism. Now, moving to the next subsection, which is credit and savings, we now trying to see some links between the two. These are often viewed as separate financial behaviors, but they are closely linked. Savings provide a buffer when households face unexpected pressures, while credit can provide support when those buffers are limited. The balance between the two tells us a great deal about financial well-being. Looking at the credit activity continues to expand, with the number of credit active South Africans increasing from 29.4 million in 2024 to 30.7 million in 2025. And this number are the formal credit that we're reporting, because we are comparing it, we're aligning it with NCR figures. At the same time, we see a shift in how consumers access goods. Purchases made through goods on credit increased from 18% to 24%, while lay-by usage declined from 25% to 17%. And please note that FinScope 2025 did not directly measure buy now, pay later products, as Nonto alluded to it. This pattern is consistent with the growing presence of BNPL and other point-of-sale credit solutions in the market. The broader message is that consumers are increasingly moving from savings first and purchasing later towards accessing goods immediately through credit. We had the stats that Nonto referred to. Moving to the next slide. Saving perhaps tells a clearer story of the financial pressure facing South Africans. Today, almost 1 in every 2 adults, that is 22.4 million South Africans, are not saving at all, while formal savings have declined sharply from 30% in 2024 to just 22% in 2025. Even among those who are working, saving remains difficult. Only 37% of workers save through formal financial institutions, with the lowest levels among informal employed South Africans. We also see fewer people saving for emergencies and longer-term goals. Instead, food has become the leading reasons for saving, ahead of education, housing, and building investment. The message, again, is clear. The challenge is no longer encouraging South Africans to save. It is restoring the ability to save. Moving to the next section. These pressures that we are referring to of day-to-day finances is also affecting long-term financial security. Only 10% of South Africans adults have retirement products, a slight decline from 11% in 2024. More concerning, 86% of economically active adults, around 25.2 million people, have no retirement provision at all. This gap is particularly evident among workers in the informal economy, where traditionally employer-sponsored retirement products are often unavailable. So the next frontier of financial inclusion is not opening more accounts. It is creating retirement solutions that work for every working South African, including those with irregular incomes. The two-pot retirement system has seen strong early uptake. 1 in 5 retirement savers have already accessed their savings pot. The reasons for withdrawal provide important insights. Many South Africans are using these funds for long-term investment, such as education, housing, home improvement, while others are using them to manage immediate financial pressures. So we have grouped them. You can see there that now the developmental or future for the future well-being is sitting at 52%. And then overall, the findings suggest that two-pot system is providing households with much needed financial flexibility, while also supporting investment that can improve future well-being. The real test of the system will be whether it helps South Africans to manage shocks today without compromising their retirement security tomorrow. The next section explores how South Africans manage risk through insurance and where country protection gaps remain. And we shall do that in the next 3 minutes that is left. South Africans' insurance priorities are clear. Funeral cover remains the most important type of insurance, with 58% of adults identifying it as their top priority, well ahead of asset or health insurance. The reason is evident in the data. The death of a family member is regarded as the biggest financial shock by 38% of South Africans, or by those who have experienced this need, far exceedingly job loss or health emergencies. These findings show that insurance choices are shaped by financial realities. When resources are limited, South Africans prioritize protecting themselves against the risk they fear most, the financial cost of a funeral. Insurance priorities reflect household realities. The challenge is to build on the success of funeral cover to expand protection against other risks that threaten long-term financial resilience. Now, moving to the next section, more than half of South Africans adults, this is 54%, hold a funeral policy, making it the country's most widely held insurance product. Uptake is even higher among the social grant recipients, with around 60% having funeral cover, significantly above the national average. However, the picture changes dramatically beyond funeral cover. Only 19% of adults have any form of non-funeral cover, meaning that 4 in 5 South Africans remain without protection against risks such as loss of assets, serious illness, or death of an income earner. While funeral insurance has successfully addressed the risk households fear most, the broader protection gap remains significantly. Expanding access to affordable insurance beyond funeral cover will be critical to strengthening household financial resilience. Now, in concluding, data only creates value when it informs actions. The evidence we have shared today points to clear priorities for strengthening financial resilience and shaping the next generation of financial inclusion in South Africa. For policymakers and regulators, the findings point to 3 clear priorities. First, unlock the potential of the informal economy by supporting micro enterprises, creating pathway for young people into productive work and reducing long-term dependency on the social grants, and a program that it's very close to FinMatra's heart. And secondly, restore South Africans' ability to save and build financial resilience. The challenge is no longer encouraging people to save. It is creating the economic conditions that make savings possible. Finally, strengthen trust in the financial system by tackling fraud, improving markets conduct, and ensuring consumers have accessible and effective redress mechanism. Now, moving to the financial service providers priority areas. The opportunity is equally clear. The next frontier is no longer expanding access. It is improving financial resilience. And I'm sure as we will be doing that, we'll also be maximizing on our profit. First, design for the informal economy with products such as micro pensions, flexible savings, affordable insurance that will reflect irregular incomes. Build on the success of funeral cover to expand protection into retirement, health, and assets. Second, help customers build resilience through solutions that encourage savings, support responsible borrowing, and improve long-term financial well-being, not just product uptake. Finally, build trust through innovation by strengthening fraud prevention, improving pricing transparency, and using customer insights to deliver simpler, more relevant financial solutions. Now, a final plea. Today's findings demonstrate why FinScope remains a national asset. South Africa's financial landscape is evolving rapidly. From the growth of informal economy and changing migrations patterns to digital finances, fraud, and new consumer behavior. To remain relevant, our evidence must evolve alongside these changes. We therefore invite both our current partners, that are the sponsors, and the prospective participant to a FinScope sector roundtable in the coming weeks. We will issue some invites, and in his closing remarks, Dr. Mutunziwa will speak to that. Together, we'll review emerging priorities, assesses whether FinScope continues to meet the sector's evolving needs, and develop a sustainable funding and implementations roadmap for FinScope South Africa 2026. With that, thank you for being a good audience, and I'll hand over Dr. Mutunziwa.
Great. Thank you so much, Jabulani. We call him Mfundisi, and you actually managed to speak and stick to our time. Also, thank you so much to our keynote speaker. We value the contribution that you have given us this morning. So taking into account the time that is allocated, we did not have the question and answer session, but I think by the powers that are vested in me, I just want to give our CEO maybe just 1 minute or so to just give a short remark before I give my closing remarks. I don't know whether, Brendan, you are ready to give any remarks.
Yes, Dr. K, thank you. And thank you again, Jabulani, for that great presentation, and to Nontobeko. Yeah, I think this year's 2025 FinScope is a bit of a mixed bag. For me, I think particularly important is the focus on what the priorities, the developmental priorities in our country is, and that is around job creation and improving people's livelihoods. I won't dwell on the vulnerability that has again come out. I think what is particularly jarring every year and in this year is that important stat around what people are borrowing money for. And that sharp increase of people borrowing money for food, I think it's increased by almost 10% from 2024. That's a jarring indicator, and it just seems to be getting worse. But I think encouragingly is within the informal sector, the increase in the number of people that are employed in the informal sector. And that's particularly important in the context of our economy not growing. And I think there is still a lot more potential in the informal sector. And I think FinScope, this year's FinScope has given us a better insight into how that informal sector is structured, how it works, how many people are employed in the different sectors. This is critical for us and for the financial sector in particular, because the challenge for the sector is, how do you support the informal sector? How do you design products for a sector that doesn't have regular incomes, that don't have salary slips, but nonetheless generate an income from that sector? How does the financial sector support the informal sector? I think that's one of the major challenges in the way the financial sector products are structured. Dr. K, there are a number of important debates. One of them is the debate around funeral and funeral insurance. I'm not sure if I should say I'm happy to see that it's not increasing, it's now remained constant from 2024. But the issue of how much South Africans spend on funerals is an important question. And by our estimates a few years ago, it was around 15 billion annually. Imagine if we could save half of that and put it into more productive use, savings, how we would be improving people's livelihoods. I think as we go forward, also that important sector of the population that receives social grants, we've seen some of the data coming through, and many of the areas, the averages for the SASSA grant recipients are higher than the national average in terms of over-indebtedness, the use of funeral insurance, etc. That is an important stat that we need to be pulling out. But I just want to echo, I think, the sentiments that these challenges are challenges that we need to work together on. And by working together, it's not only the financial sector, but there are other sectors in our economy that need to contribute to this challenge. The financial sector can't create jobs on their own. We need to be working with other sectors of the economy to make sure that this works. Dr. K, thank you again for, I think, a sterling job that the team has done. The data continues to deepen our insights into our economy and how we need to improve it together. So thank you very much, Dr. K. I will leave it there.
Great. Thank you so much, Brendan. We are almost coming to the end of the program, and I just want to thank everyone once again, especially our syndicate members. We recognize the effort that you put in the FinScope process, but it's also important to mention that this data was collected using the research house. So I would want to thank Citizen Survey for the collaboration that we did. I'm sure I saw Washila. I sometimes write very nasty emails when things are not going according to what we would have expected, especially on the timelines and stuff like that. But we are happy that we always get a very good and quality product. So thank you so much for everything. And finally, I also want to thank my team, the data team that has worked on this project for many, many years, and the broader FinMap Trust that has also helped to make sure that the presentation that has been delivered today is of good quality. Thank you so much to the knowledge management team. And here in the office, I do have Michael. Thank you so much for everything that we have done. And I think lastly, I would just want to say, in terms of the FinScope 2026 outlook, we look forward to continuing our collaboration as we continue the financial inclusion journey. We have begun engaging our existing and prospective syndicate members to build broader stakeholder participation with immediate priority of securing funding commitments to support the implementation in 2026. The FinScope survey is quite intense, so we are really, banking on our syndicate members and any other future members that want to partner with us. So we invite the government, departments, regulators, financial institutions, development partners, industry associations, and any other stakeholders to partner with us as we sustain this vital national research initiative. By investing in FinScope South Africa 2026, stakeholders will be able to ensure that we continue to implement the robust national representative financial inclusion data that informs policy, that drives innovation, that support market development and enhance financial well-being of all South Africans. And I think at the beginning, I just hinted that the data is used by different stakeholders. So we get requests for the FinScope data from different stakeholders. Maybe just to mention some of the academic institutions that request data from us. We get a lot of requests from Stellenbosch, from Wits, from UCT, and other academic institutions in Africa and outside Africa. So this is really a very important resource. So with these few remarks, I just want to thank everyone again and wish you a great day further. Thank you so much. Like I said, we didn't have enough time to go through the question and answer, but we also made it deliberate so that we can continue engaging. FinScope is it's a gold mine, so we would still want to continue mining the data. And for anyone that wants to continue engaging with us, please feel free to send me an email or to Jabulani, or sending an email to info@finmark.org.za. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this morning and have a blessed day further. Thank you.